First of all, Olaf should have been able to unfraw Anna's heart, because Olaf said that some people are worth melting for. That should have been enough love to unfraw her heart. So it's dumb.
Didn't I make you laugh? Didn't I make you smile?
Hi friends, it's Rory, and today's video is a review slash discussion on Conceal Don't Feel, which is the Frozen Twisted Tale by Jen Colonnetta. By Jen Colonnetta. This is the book that I read for Elsa, who suggested something about the history of Arendelle. It is also one of the newest in the series of Disney Twisted Tales, where they take one aspect of a Disney movie and they twist it and make an entirely different story about it. Now, I did mention in my wrap-up for December that I was thinking of doing this review because I think there's a very interesting kind of discussion that can take place on this book compared to the original Frozen movie. And that I think this book is good and the original Frozen movie is not. Now, let me get up front about it. I do not like the Frozen one. I jokingly tweeted about my order after I read this of Frozen related content, and it was my second least favorite thing, or maybe it was my third. I don't remember now. I'm gonna put the picture up because I actually think it's funny and I was being a jackass and I thought this is funny. But I have never been a big fan of Frozen. I did see it a couple times in theaters when it originally came out, because at the time Florida was going through a ice storm and everything was closed except for the movie theater. But I've never really liked it, and then of course everything after that was overplayed, and I never understood why it was so popular, and I'm gonna break down why that is so that then I can compare it to the book. Elsa as a character is not good. Elsa is not a good character. Anyone who's ever told me that Elsa is their favorite Disney princess, I've never been like, that's dumb, because I don't believe in telling someone that their opinion is wrong. But that's dumb. Elsa has no personality. Tell me in Frozen 1, before Let It Go, tell me one aspect of her personality that doesn't have anything to do with her powers. There's nothing. Meanwhile, Anna, who is a much better character, in fact, I think she is the best character of Frozen. You know that she likes to run around, you know that she wants to be there with her sister, but her sister's not there anymore. You know that she hangs out and she looks at the paintings. You know that she goes around and explores the castle. You know that she's very high energy, and this is all things that you have seen throughout the movie. Meanwhile, Elsa, the only thing that you've seen is that she's afraid of her powers, and that's not a good character. Anna as a whole is a better character than Elsa. So anytime anyone's ever been like, Elsa's my favorite princess, I'm like, why? Elsa is a cardboard cutout. Elsa is Let It Go. That's it. That's the only thing that's good about her. And along with that, Elsa is completely helpless throughout the entire thing, basically. Elsa, you have ice powers. What the fuck are you doing with your ice powers besides making a castle and making clothes? You could do so many things. You're the freaking ice queen. You're the snow queen. What are you doing? The trolls are useless. I have said this a long time. The trolls are the worst part of Frozen, and there's already a lot of bad things about Frozen, but the trolls are the worst. They show up for 5 minutes in the beginning, they show up for 5 minutes towards the end, and they're dumb. Why are they there? This story could have been done without the trolls. Instead of trolls, just have one character. The one troll that's important, which is Grandpappy. Is that what his name is? I completely forgot because I don't care about him. Just have that one character be just like someone they go to. You do not need the trolls at all. And then there's my biggest, most hated thing about Frozen 1, and that is fucking Hans. The Hans twist is so stupid because you do not see it coming. And that's why it's bad. No one saw Hans being evil coming because there was nothing there to show that he was going to turn evil. So Shrey Phillips Productions actually did a fantastic video on why Disney twist villains don't work, and I'm going to link that down below because everything he says in that is kind of what I'm going to say, except he says it better. The way that a twist villain should work is that there should be small hints that they are going to be bad, but nothing that like completely goes against kind of the good aspects until he turns. So, in my opinion, one of the best twist villains in a Disney related sense is Pixar's Toy Story 2, the twist villain of Stinky Pete, because you think that he's a good guy throughout it, but when you really look at it, he's trying the entire time, he's trying to nicely make Woody see things the way that he is, and he's trying to nicely like kind of bad talk Andy and be like, I know that you love Andy, but when you really think about it, it makes more sense. He's not always going to love you, but you know who will always love you? All of those kids in Japan that are going to be coming to see you. You specifically, they're going to love you. And it talks in Woody's mind. So, but because it's done so subtly, when it finally does come to the end, and you see, like, is it Jessie? I haven't watched Toy Story 2 in a little bit, but I believe Jessie, like, turns the thing around and it's like, Stinky Pete, we're gonna go home and be with Andy. He's not there. That's a shock, because it's like, oh my gosh, he was the bad guy. That's a good twist villain, because you have those tiny little niblets of the evil, and then he's evil and he goes into evil. Along with that is that you have Stinky Pete being evil for long enough that you get to see him be evil, and that's great. What you don't have with Hans is that. So once again, Hans, there should be little niblets ahead of time that Hans is a bad guy. And there is not. I've had this argument a lot because some people are just like, yeah, there are. And I'm like, there absolutely is not. So there's the part at the end of For the First Time in Forever where they meet on Hans meet and they talk and the thing, and then Anna gets off the boat that they're in, and Hans is still on the boat, which is being held by his horse, and she waves and he waves, and then the horse waves, and because the horse isn't holding the boat anymore, he falls into the water, and he lifts the boat up and he smiles at Anna. Now, if this were a good twist villain, that smile would show evilness. But it doesn't. It kind of when you look at that smile, and I'm going to put a picture up so everyone can see it in case it's been a while since you've seen Frozen. When you look at that smile, that's a smile of, oh wow, I really liked that girl. It's not the smile of, ah yes, my devious plan is going forward. No, it's very much like oh, I liked her. And a way that they could have done it is they could have changed the smile a little bit so it kind of still looked like a look that you'd have with someone that you liked face-wise, but eyes-wise it kind of looked weird, and maybe just like a little bit of a darker like musical note instead of the light fluffy. All of those say that he likes her, not that he's evil. Then there's another scene that makes this so dumb. It's the scene where Hans and the palace guards and the two bad guys that the Duke of Weaseltown sent. Elsa is attacking both of them. She's got the ice on the one, and it's pushing him off the mountain, like off the balcony, and it'll push him off the mountain. And the other, she's putting ice spears basically at him that could kill him. And she's got both of those. And Hans just comes in and is just like, you know, don't become the monster that they say that you are. Elsa, and she like goes to look at him, and then one of the bad guys goes to like hit her, like shoot her with a crossbow. If Hans was evil and he really wanted Elsa to die so that he could marry Anna and then become queen or king, then he didn't have to do anything. If that guy killed Elsa and she died, every other person would be like, oh, Hans was there helping her. He was telling her to not do what it was, and then the guy died or killed her. Like, he's in the clear. But instead, he saves her. Why? A way that this could have been made into a twist villain, it would have made it obvious for older people, but the younger people wouldn't have seen it, was instead of him like going and pushing the thing up and the chandelier dropping, have him like look over, look back at her, and like you don't have to show that he's looking at the guy. Just have him look over and look back, and then have another guard stop the guy trying to kill Elsa. Because then it still looks like he was trying to help her. But now we have kind of a clue that Hans isn't who he says he is. And it's so obvious. That being said, the Anna, if only there was someone out there who loved you, is forever and ever one of the best lines to bring out when you're being a fucking jackass. Just like, it's so good, and I love it, especially, oh my gosh, there's a meme after Kingdom Hearts 3 came out where there's a part in the Toy Story world that basically came down to it, and someone took that scene and made it into a meme with the, if only if there was someone out there who loved you. And it's so good. So they could have included that line and just made him a better villain overall. Along with that, there's more personal things about Frozen that I don't like that wouldn't really compare to this book. Like, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that they had Jonathan Groff, Broadway star Jonathan Groff, and they didn't give him a song, like a main song. They changed that in Frozen 2 because they must have realized that they were fucking idiots. But in Frozen 1, he has 30 seconds of him singing. You got Jonathan Groff and you didn't give him a song? Morons! Along with that, overall, I think the Hans storyline could have been better if instead of making him a villain, they made it so that him and Anna just weren't in love. Instead, I think it would have been a better lesson if maybe, like, they did kind of, like, you know, have crushes on each other at first in the beginning, but then throughout their own thing and the time apart, they realized that they didn't really have feelings for each other, and then they could, like, go in for the kiss, and they do have the kiss, but it doesn't work, and she's still freezing, and it's kind of just like, your first love is not going to be the person that you end up with. That's just a personal thing. I think it could have been a much more impactful story that way. But it doesn't matter. I think the Frozen heart is fucking stupid. I think it's dumb. And that's just a personal thing. Actually, there's another thing that the latest Sandersides at this point has said, where there's no proper villain song in this. At this point, the only villain song in Frozen 1 is Love is an Open Door, which isn't a villain song because it's supposed to be a love ballad. Even though we know that one half of that is a villain, that doesn't automatically make it a villain song. So there should have been a villain song in it. And it would have been really, really cool if it was a reprised version of Love is an Open Door, but except Hans is evil. That would have been cool. And that's on Roman Sanders. Anyways, now that I'm done complaining about Frozen, I'm gonna go into the differences between this book and Frozen and talk about why I like them. So, in this book, the twisted part is what if Anna and Elsa didn't know each other? Now, they're still sisters in this book, but overall, it creates a more in-depth, like, a more interesting relationship. The story is that when they're younger, the same thing happens as what happens in Frozen. They go to play, she hits her in the head. Okay, whatever. It's still kind of dumb to me, but it's okay. So, the same thing happens, they take them to the trolls. Grandpappy is explaining that they're going to take the memories of Elsa's magic away, and Elsa gets upset and is like, no, I don't want her to forget about my magic. And so she goes and she interrupts the spell, which then causes an explosion, which causes them to both faint and break apart. Now, because the spell was interrupted, the memories end up creating a curse where if the two girls are close to each other, Anna starts to freeze, which I think is a much more interesting way of getting Anna to freeze. So they need to be held separate, and the king and queen are like, we feel bad because they love each other so much. I don't understand how they can be together. Now, the curse is that when they're together, Anna will freeze, except for the time when they need each other the most. Grandpappy is like, I can erase their memories of each other, and I can erase the memories of everyone except for you two and obviously the trolls. That you have another daughter. So they decide to do that. So they erase each other's memories of each other, and then they erase the memories of the kingdom so that they only think that there's one daughter, which is Elsa. And then they give Anna to the queen's best friend to raise. So Elsa is being raised as the crown princess, and Anna is being raised up the mountain in a village where she is the daughter of a pair of bakers. And that's how they live their life. No one remembers Anna. She always wants to go to Arendelle because she feels that's where she belongs. Things like that. And then once a month, the queen will go and visit Anna, and she'll just pretend that she is Anna's adopted mother's best friend, which she is, but she'll go by the name of Freya, and she'll pretend she's a seamstress in the palace, things like that. So every month she'll go and see her Anna, but she's pretending to be not the queen. Along with that, when the curse was broken, Elsa's powers were temporarily broken, so she doesn't have ice powers right now, and they'll only come out when she is at her lowest. So at this point, we have Anna, who is living with an adopted family as the daughter of a set of bakers, and we have Elsa, who's living as the crown princess to the king and queen, and she has no powers. So the first couple of chapters are just kind of getting that set up. Elsa and Anna's parents dies, but they die the way they did in the first movie, and Elsa, when she finds out, is so heartbroken and distressed that she ends up getting her powers back. So she freezes her whole room, and then she creates Olaf. So Olaf, instead of being with Anna, is there with Elsa. Now, before the parents died, Elsa had heard her parents talk about a girl named Anna, and so she doesn't know who this Anna is. And then when she creates Olaf, Olaf is like, where's Anna? And she's like, do you know Anna? And he's like, I don't remember, because the effects of their memory erasing is also affecting him. So for the next 3 years, just like in the movie, Elsa kind of like goes in on herself, and her and Olaf are trying to figure out who Anna is. Meanwhile, Anna is trying to save up money so that she can go to Arendelle, and she also meets Kristoff a little bit, and they kind of like know each other. Like, he comes to the village that they go to, and she kind of like has a crush on him, and he kind of has a crush on her. Anna and Kristoff are really, really cute. I always liked them, and I continue to love them in this. Along with that, there's the Duke of Weaselton, who brings Prince Han to kind of court Elsa. And this is where the first comparison to Frozen and this happen, Hans is trying to court Elsa instead of Anna. Like, there are a couple chapters where he gets his own point of view because it switches mostly back and forth between Elsa and Anna, with a couple of chapters that Kristoff is point of view and a couple of chapters where Han is point of view. In the first chapter that Han is point of view, it talks about it and it does what Han should have done in the movie. It sets him up as the twist villain while still making it seem like he's not a bad guy. So he talks about like how he thinks that Elsa's pretty, and he talks about how like none of the rest of his brothers really cared about it when they talked about Arendelle's princess, but he was kind of interested in what they had to say. And it basically goes on like that, and how he came over and he's been talking to her. But then, and here's where it gets the like beginning of an inkling that he is going to be a twist villain, even though it's not a twist villain because I know he's the villain. In the very last sentence, it goes, and besides, anything or accidents happen all the time. There we go. It's clearly been set up that like he's there and he's trying to get with Elsa, but that line sets him up as a bad guy. And then the way he talks going forward is he's constantly talking, because there are a couple of chapters before the coronation and her going up the North Mountain, and that chapter of his point of view where they're kind of like courting each other together, and will say things that sound very, very sweet, but if you know that he's a villain, which everyone who reads this knows that he's a villain, but if you know that he's a villain, it sounds really manipulative and like really, really like sneaky. And especially there's a part where so the difference in this is that compared to the movie is that in this it happens right before her coronation. She finds out that Anna is her sister because she finds a letter in a box that her father gave her, and this letter says that Anna is her sister. And she doesn't get to read the entire letter. She only reads that Anna is her sister, and she begins to remember her memories. But before that happened, the Duke of Weaselton and the prime, or like the head advisor for Elsa's parents, who has been kind of running the kingdom before Elsa's coronation, are kind of talking to her with Hans there, and the Duke of Weaselton is like talking about how, oh, it would be so great if there was a marriage proposal that we could announce today. Wouldn't that make the people feel really, really happy? And Elsa's kind of like, and the head advisor is like, no, I don't think that's good. And the Duke of Weaselton is like, no, Hans, you should propose. And so Hans proposes. He goes, we could rule well together. Clearly meaning that all he cares about is ruling. And then that whole thing happens. And she goes back into her room because Olaf, who no one has seen because she keeps him hidden, is calling for her, and she goes back in and she finds the letter. She remembers Anna. She passes out. They come in, and she is just like, no, oh my gosh, no, I need to get out. And she accidentally, basically the same as Frozen, she accidentally sends out her ice, all that jazz. And then she goes out. There's the coronation crowd around with the woman and the baby, just like the movie, and she ends up going up the north. Anna is in her town when this happens, so they get snowed in. She's snowed in, and she realizes, she goes, something must have happened in Arendelle, like that's where it ended up where it happened in the beginning, because she kind of sees the snow coming towards her. She's outside talking to Kristoff at the time, and so she's like, something must have happened to Arendelle. I feel like something in my head is telling me that I'm the only one that can fix this, because it's the connection she has to Elsa. And so she goes, I need to go to Arendelle to figure out what happened. She hires Kristoff the same way, and she goes and they go to Arendelle. And she gets there, and it's kind of like in the movie Anastasia, where she's like, I remember this place. And Kristoff is like, how could you remember this place? You weren't here. It is very much like the Once Upon a December like sequence in Anastasia. But while they're there, they find Olaf, because Anna goes and follows the feelings, and she gets led back to Elsa's room, and she finds Olaf, and Olaf is like, oh my gosh, you're Anna. And she's like, you know me? And he's like, yeah, but I don't remember how. And Anna's just like, do you know where Princess Elsa is? Or Anna's like, oh man, I wish we could find Princess Elsa. And Olaf is like, I know where Princess Elsa is. And so then they go and they try to find Elsa. After the coronation happens, Elsa, she saw in the letter that she had to go to the Valley of Living Rocks, which is where the trolls are. So she is able to find the trolls, and they explain what's going on and explain that her and Anna, if they get close to each other, Anna will freeze. So Elsa is like, oh no, I can't let that happen. But they're like, don't worry. If Anna remembers who you are, then that means the curse is broken. So Elsa's like, okay, well then I'll leave until she remembers who I am, because he's just like, I can feel the magic breaking. She's starting to remember who you are. So Elsa then goes to her palace, or goes and makes her ice palace. But Hans finds her at the ice palace and kind of does like a, you know, we could rule so well together. And Elsa sees that he's full of shit. And so she goes, you only want to be with me because you think that you can rule. Well, I'm not going to do it. Then, like, the guards who Hans has led there, and they no longer trust her. It's not like the movie where people are still kind of on Elsa's side and they're like, don't hurt the princess, all that, or the queen, all that. This one, it's very much, the princess did this to us, we have to get her, ah! So there's kind of like a little battle, and so they are attacking her, and she had created what is Marshmallow in the thing. And there's battle, so Hans is fighting against Marshmallow, and the Duke of Weaselton's and Arendelle guards are after her, and she's on the stairs in the ice palace. And Marshmallow gets his leg chopped off, falls on the stairs, and they start to collapse, and Elsa runs and jumps off the stairs before she can fall down, and blacks out. So after that, Hans and the guards take her to Arendelle, and it's just like the movie, they lock her up. And Hans has read the letter from the mother, so he knows about Anna. So he then goes to find her. Kristoff and Anna and Olaf are lost because Olaf doesn't know where he's going. When Hans gets there, Anna's like, oh, we're trying to go this, and Kristoff is like, no, we're not, we're trying to go home, because they're having a fight. And so Anna is just like tricked by Hans. So in the end, Hans is like, they actually took the princess back to Arendelle, so you don't need to go to the Valley of Living Rocks. So Anna goes with him because she still thinks that for some reason she needs to see Princess Elsa. She feels like she needs to talk to her because they're bond. Kristoff's like, no, I'm gonna go. Kristoff goes back to the trolls. He's able to find them, and Hans and the guards and Anna go back to Arendelle. And Hans, when they get there, spills the beans and is like, you're the lost princess. And he talks to her, and she's like, wait, what? You're crazy. And he's like, no, you're the lost princess. I know, I read a letter from your parents to the princess. She cursed you, and so they had to, because she's evil, and they had to erase your memories. But now that you know, we can rule together. The kingdom will be so happy to have their lost princess back that it won't matter. All we have to do is get rid of Elsa, and you and I can get married, and we can live together. And Anna's like, what are you talking about? Get rid of Elsa. And he's like, Elsa's evil. And she's like, no, she's not. Which, arguable. But so she escapes from Hans, and she goes down to the dungeons where Elsa is, and they're there, and Anna starts to freeze because they're too close, and Elsa's like trying to get away, and it's like the movie, she ends up yanking. The trolls have told Kristoff that Hans is bad and that Anna will freeze, so he's off towards Arendelle just like in the movie. She leaves, Elsa leaves, Hans goes to try to kill her. Anna goes out there into the storm because she's like, Elsa's my sister. I may not remember her being my sister, but I need to help her. Kristoff is there. Hans, it's just like in the movie. Hans goes to stab her, or to like kill her. She goes, holds up her hand, she freezes, sword explodes, all that jazz. And then from there on, it's just like now that I've talked way too long about the plot of this book. Now, let's talk about why this book is better. With the points that I gave for why the movie is not good. Elsa has more of a character. Elsa's still not the best character, but she definitely has more of a character in this. Like, because you can specifically read from her point of view, you can see where she has snarky bits, and she very much is about being responsible and trying to follow in her father's footsteps. And then when she has the ice powers and the secret, she has more of like a historical kind of like, she's just a better character overall. And then you have Hans. The biggest complaint that I had for Frozen is that the twist villain shit is dumb, and you don't see it coming, and so that makes it dumb. You don't see it coming because there's nothing to imply that it's coming, and so it's dumb. It's completely different in this. You see it coming, but you also see the good parts to his character. And so in the very beginning, it's kind of like, oh, if you didn't know Hans was the villain, it would be like, oh, okay, he says some things that are kind of like weird. But then he turns around and he's a real villain for a long portion. About halfway into the book, he's done being nice to Elsa. He still is manipulative to Anna because she doesn't know, but to Elsa, he is done being nice. He is a true villain. Much better, much closer to what an actual good twist villain would be. Now, the story itself, I think, is much more interesting. I think the reason why she's freezing in this is much more interesting than the fact that she got hit by a frozen bit into her heart. That's dumb. This, that there's a curse, that if they're close, she'll freeze, great. I genuinely like the thought of like the kingdom forgetting that Anna exists. I think it's great. I think it's very, very interesting overall. Along with that, it gives a little bit more reason for the trolls to be there. Not a lot, but it gives a little bit more reason. They're the ones that are making the power, or using the magic to make the kingdom all forget. And then the ending I felt was much better, because instead of, oh, love is needed to unthaw a frozen heart, instead it's, if they're too close, until they both fully remember being each other's sisters, Anna will freeze. That makes more sense to me. That's a better story. This has been too long of me talking about why this is a better Frozen story than the actual Frozen that we got. If this had been the movie and we had some bomb songs, can you imagine? Let's go. Let's talk about what the songs would have been like if we had this as the movie. Most of this is actually the backstory. So this is where the coronation stuff happens. This is actually at the point where Elsa is freezing the thing. So it's halfway through. That brings up another thing that'll fix it, is that there's not a lot of rules for Frozen in the Frozen book. There's no really prologue that kind of explains how the world works, like there is in, say, Tangled. Tangled has a history of how the hair happened and how she got into this tower. But there's not that in Frozen. So this kind of like, it doesn't explain where she got the powers, but it does kind of explain how the situation came. So, say this is the story. You could still have Let It Go. I don't know why you'd want Let It Go. I don't really like Idina Menzel. It's also extremely overplayed. But you could still have Let It Go. So you could still have your money cash grab in this movie. Every other song would be completely different. So there could be a song in which both of them are singing in the very beginning. Kind of like When Will My Life Begin from Tangled. That could be the first song. Anna sings about how she feels where she's not where she belongs. Elsa sings about how she feels like she's missing something. And they're doing it as kind of like a duet-y thing, but they're both in their different places. First song, great off the bat. Then you could have a proper villain song for Hans, where he talks about how he wants to rule with Elsa, and is kind of like saying things like his song. It sounds nice and kind of like a ballad type thing, but it has those darker implications. And his last line could be that accidents always happen line. Okay, then you could, instead of having a love song between Hans and Anna, you could have a love song between Kristoff and Anna. Cool, you could give Kristoff a proper song. I don't care what it is. Give him a proper song in this. Then you have, once again, Let It Go. You could have a reprised version of Hans's villain song when he's telling Anna about it, and she's just there kind of a little bit like the First Time in Forever reprise, where except Anna would be the one arguing against Han, who's saying that they should rule together. Then you have basically the same thing for the ending of Frozen. And then afterwards, there's a song for when they're all together after Elsa gets coronated, where they're together and they talk about how they found how Anna is back in the place where she belongs, and Elsa's found her missing piece, and it all coincides in that final song. And it's good. This would have been a good movie. If it had been like this, I wouldn't have hated Frozen, and I wouldn't have felt so bad. And also, if Frozen had been like this, and it had also been as popular as the Frozen that we got was, this would have been a bomb-ass Kingdom Hearts level. Overall, I gave this 4 stars. There were definitely things that I thought were kind of but it wasn't actually really plot-based. I still feel like Elsa was a weak character. I don't know what they could have done to Elsa to make her stronger, because Elsa as a character I think is just destined to be boring a little bit and not that great of a character. It definitely improved in this, but it wasn't like overwhelming how good it was. And then this book did have some cheesy stuff, like when she goes up to the North Mountain, they legitimately quote Let It Go. They say a kingdom of isolation, and it looks like I'm the queen, and then a couple lines later she goes, but the cold never bothered me anyway. And I'm just like, ugh, I hate Let It Go. I think it's a strong story. I think it's a really interesting story, and I definitely think it's much better than Frozen. And you really should read this book. I know that I've spoiled a lot and I've basically gone over the plot, but it's really good. So if kind of listening to me badly explain this plot made you interested in it, I really do recommend it. And that's been my review on Conceal Don't Feel and comparing it to the original Frozen. I hope that you've had a great time listening to me babble. As always, there's the link down below to where you can register to vote. Let your voice be heard in our upcoming election. I hope you have a very chill rest of your day. Bye!